gentlemen, our partners in this event, Amman Institute, good evening. On behalf of CUMERIC's director, Dr. Safwan Masri, and as resident fellow at the Institute for Scholars of CUMERIC, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you this evening to another event of our speaker series. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Luna Ghaffran, a visiting fellow at CUMERIC. May I also welcome Dr. Ghaffran's colleague, Dr. Rami Daher, who will kindly introduce our speaker and will lead the subsequent discussion. Dr. Daher is a familiar face at CUMERIC's events, and for those who don't know, Dr. Daher teaches architecture in the German Jordan University and owns Duraj, an architectural design firm in Jordan.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CUMERIC. It's really a pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Luna Ghaffran, whom I've known for so many years. So basically, I'll start with informal introductions and move then to the formal CV that I printed from the internet, which is extremely loaded with achievements, so I don't know where to start. I have known Luna since we were colleagues at the University of Jordan. That's a long time ago. We were both students of architecture and good friends as well. And also I have known Luna as a passionate defender of cultural heritage in the city of Amman and elsewhere in Jordan. And I have to say that unfortunately we have lost Luna, first of all to Michigan and the US, and second to Canada and Waterloo. But with the formal introductions, Luna holds a certificate in museum studies from the University of Michigan in the US, and also a PhD in urban and regional planning, also from the University of Michigan. In addition, she holds a Master's of Arts in Heritage Management from the University of Birmingham in the UK, and an MA in Archaeology, also from the University of Jordan, and a BS in Architecture from the University of Jordan as well. Luna has worked significantly on different projects, research projects concerning city planning, urban design, heritage conservation, and currently she is a CERMOC visiting scholar here in Amman, Jordan, and also is affiliated with research regarding the city of Amman with the Amman Institute. In addition, she's currently an assistant professor of architecture and planning at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And in addition to that, she had also worked as research assistant at the University of Michigan while she was pursuing her PhD there. Luna, before leaving Jordan, was an adjunct lecturer at the Hashemite University in Jordan. And also her professional experience in Jordan includes program assistant at UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization Program, and also an architect at House of Architects, Jordan, in addition to public relations officer at the Jordan National Gallery of Fine Arts, the offices of Princess Wajdan Ali here in Amman. And before working at the National Gallery of Fine Arts, she was an administrative director for the Friends of Archaeology here in Jordan. It's actually a very intensive CV that is also full of research papers and publications that I don't want to bore you with, but it's very intensive. So please join me to welcome Dr. Luna Ghaffran.
In the Middle East, we have a rich heritage
We have cities from Jerusalem to Aleppo, to Damascus, to Beirut. Why is this topic extremely important for us, and where are the problems that we have to deal with? I identify actually two major problems. The first major problem is that heritage planning or preserving historic cities means high fixed costs, because we deal with marketing for tourism, we deal with infrastructure rehabilitation, and we deal with urban design. None of these feats is cheap. To give you an idea, Egypt, for example, spends on marketing 50 million plus every year. Infrastructure rehabilitation, I was told that in Aleppo it would take 40 years and over $300 million to rehabilitate the historic city. That's not counting the annual maintenance costs of rehabilitation. Urban design is really expensive. The strategies we adopt for these kinds of planning tools, when we market, we use the unique selling proposition or the distinctiveness of a historic city. We identify what is it about these historic cities that distinguishes them and makes them unique, and we market them accordingly. Why would I go to Cairo and not Aleppo? What is it that is unique about Cairo that makes me go there and prioritize that destination as my vacation destination or heritage destination? We also, sometimes, we fall in the trap of dealing with place as product. We forget that there are human beings living in those cities. And finally, when we deal with urban design, primarily we should be concerned with historic preservation. The consequences, as I said, is that we prioritize as an economic approach because of these high fixed costs of tourism and heritage preservation. And because we spend so much money, we want to make it up through bringing tourism in. So we start to prioritize tourist needs, what do tourists want, how can we plan for better tourism, and so on. And we begin to forget a little bit about local residents, sometimes more than a little bit. The second problem that I identified is that we have this global demand for a distinctively local product, meaning that I have tourists coming to Petra from all over the world, hundreds of nationalities sometimes, and they all want to consume this one particular, very local product that has a typical Southern Jordanian identity, let's say. So how can I present this product to the tourists from all backgrounds in a way that they can all consume it and enjoy it and still maintain its distinctiveness in a way that I do not lose the distinctive identity of a historic city? The tools we adopt are actually Disneyfication, and I don't use Disneyfication here in a derogatory manner. I actually use it as a planning tool. It means that I establish standards, I establish quality controls, and Disneyland is well known that it is actually the birthplace of actually establishing standards and quality control at destinations. And at the same time, in the process of commodifying the heritage, I actually have to legitimize it. I have to make it consumable by those tourists from different backgrounds. So the strategies that I adopt are homogenization. I make things that are easily consumable. I commodify the place, the historic city. I treat it as a product. And sometimes this entails a little bit of staging, of making of things, so that tourists can actually enjoy them and be able to consume them. The consequences can be, if I take all these strategies to an extreme, is a deterioration of the tourist experience. The place is no longer distinctive. At the same time, if I commodify the heritage too much, that might lead to the disapproval and alienation of local communities who might not approve of their heritage being sold to tourism. And I begin to gradually lose the sense of distinctiveness or the uniqueness of the destination, because it begins to look like every other destination. And there are multitudes of cities that have lost their distinctive identity. The best example, one of the best examples I can think of, is Antalya in Turkey on the Mediterranean, where the historic core was so commodified that it became just one of those other tourist resorts that has no identity or character, and actually it started losing tourism. And of course, eventually, all this leads to a loss of sustainability. And I don't focus here only on environmental sustainability. I also address the social, economic, and cultural sustainability. proposition? How are we going to market it? How are we going to increase tourist numbers? And by increasing tourist numbers, we can increase their length of stay, and eventually we can increase their spending in the historic city. So, but at the same time, planners are also concerned with sustainability. Because as I said, if the scenario that happens in Antalya happens, then we lose destination. We no longer can bring in tourists. So this is the practice concern. The reality is that these historic cities have residents living in them, people with needs and their own interests, people who have to have their own choices and be able to make their own choices, and people who need to be empowered. And what's happening lately, for example, in Egypt, gives us a good example is of the need to empower people. We cannot always make decisions on their behalf. People want to be participants in the decision-making process. So this is the reality of the case. Another part of the reality, but the theory tends to focus more on it, is the place experience of tourists. Tourists who come, who want a distinctive cultural experience of the place, who want to consume it and enjoy it. And we always talk about conflicts between tourists and residents. So I was always intrigued, is there really a conflict in the minds of tourists and residents outside of the minds of us as researchers? So what I argue for is that there is a gap between these three main users or main stakeholders of the historic city. So I'll go into the case study and we'll start addressing what's happening in the case study step by step. So I'm sure you all know where Aleppo is. It's in northern Syria, right close to the border with Turkey. Aleppo is actually dominated by the citadel of Aleppo, which is a historic town that some people actually claim, or there is historic research that says that the name Aleppo comes from Abraham milking the cow, Halab al-Baqarah, or from the Semitic origins, and it's part of the town are actually holy. So the historic citadel dominates the view of the city, dominates the visual experience of the city, and there are these traditional souks, and they are covered. For those of you who have never been to Aleppo, actually, it's considered one of the longest covered old souks or bazaars in the world. And then, of course, Aleppo has these typical Islamic, and I'm not going to discuss the term Islamic here, these courtyard houses built with a typical traditional Mediterranean Islamic style, where I would have a courtyard surrounded by the house rooms, and the houses would be divided into summer sections and winter sections, depending on the orientation and so on. In addition, of course, there is a maze of these tiny, tiny alleys, where every neighborhood has a main street, and off of that main street branch smaller streets that lead to semi-private cul-de-sacs, and mostly all of the houses surrounding a particular cul-de-sac would belong to a same group or a same family, extended family sometimes. So, Aleppo is also one of the cities that are inscribed on the World Heritage List. In the World Heritage List, we have sites like Petra, individual sites or archaeological remains, but we also have entire cities that are considered World Heritage Sites. And Aleppo is one of those cities, and it's not easy to inscribe a city as a World Heritage Site. It's inscribed for two criterions. It fits two of the five criteria of World Heritage. It's a unique testimony to a cultural tradition or a civilization. Also, it represents an outstanding example that illustrates a significant historical stage.